Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome. We'll get started in just a few minutes as people are showing up and coming in from the waiting room. I thought maybe while we're waiting for those of you that are here, if I see you on your video, maybe a quick introduction, just your name and where you're currently located in the state, because what I love about Arizona Town Hall is we bring in people from all over. And maybe I'll start with my friend down there in Yuma, Linda.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Linda Elliott Nelson from Yuma.
And how about Hector? I'm looking at board members right now.
Morning, Hector Plasencia, located in Phoenix, Arizona.
And let's see, Anna.
Hi, good morning. I'm Anna Chalk. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
And again, if you're just coming in, I thought for those of you who have your video on, we'll just do a quick introduction while we're waiting for others to come in. It's a wonderful way to quickly connect with others around the state who care about the future of our state. And since we're being sponsored this program by Vitalyst, I see some of my Vitalyst friends. I'll wait for Sergio, but how about Suzanne?
Suzanne Feaster, President and CEO of Vitalyst, and I'll pass it over to my colleague, David Martinez.
Thank you, Suzanne. Good morning, everybody. I'm David Martinez. I'm a director here at Vitalyst Health Foundation. I'm originally from Marana, but I'm based in Phoenix now.
How about Kathy Connect?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Connect, and I'm here in Peoria, Arizona.
And Ken, with the amazing hot air balloons behind you.
I'm Ken Martin. I've been in Arizona for over 47 years, and I'm currently in Surprise, Arizona.
And Lori?
Morning, everyone. Laurie Lyles with AZ Impact for Good in Phoenix.
And one of our newest student interns, Jacob?
Hi there. My name is Jacob Puros, and I'm from Mesa, Arizona.
And since we're in the East Valley, how about Elaine over there in Gilbert?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Elaine Kessler with the Gilbert Chamber of Commerce, and back here's Nikki Cost.
Wonderful, welcome. And Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Beckerman. I live in Phoenix, and I'm here representing Maricopa Community Colleges.
Wonderful. And again, for those of you just joining, I thought while we were waiting for folks to come in from the waiting room, only if your video was on, just having you introduce and where you're from, because one of the important parts of the mission of the Arizona Town Hall is connecting people across geographies, across professions, across ages, and of course, especially with this year's topic, across political affiliations and beliefs, because that is just incredibly important to moving our communities and our state forward. And we are recording today's program. You may have already received that notice. Just wanted to make sure you all know that we're doing that, because there are so many who are interested in this discussion and who are not always able to attend our programs. So I'm going to go ahead and get us officially started and introduce myself. I'm Tara Jackson, been president of the Arizona Town Hall for 19 years now, believe it or not, and have been involved even prior to that time as a longtime volunteer and supporter, someone who really believes in the power of the process of what the Arizona Town Hall does to not only bring people together across those differences, but to find the best solutions to the most challenging issues facing us, whether it's in our community, in our state, in our nation, and even now in our world with some of our programs that are reaching across country lines and across the world and bringing our process to others in different parts of the world. So a quick overview of who we are. We're a nonprofit, been doing this since 1962 as an organization. It is a homegrown out of Arizona process and procedure that, as I mentioned earlier, is being studied across the world as a method for bringing diverse voices together and solving problems. We now pick one topic a year and really dive deep into that, both grassroots and grass tops, having as many conversations with people around the state as we can to get their input on how to solve the problem, but also education about what the problem is and how we can all work together to solve it. This year, our topic is voting and elections. And before I give the briefest overview of the topic, I just want to thank our sponsors for today's program. So this will be your one PowerPoint slide showing very quickly, because we really couldn't do any of this work without those who financially sponsor us and who also partner with us to bring these conversations to many communities who otherwise would not be able to be a part of them. Vitalyst Health Foundation is our primary sponsor for this particular program, and very much an important and engaged partner with us in trying to create systems change in communities and throughout the state. Thomas R. Brown Foundations is also a major supporter for all of the programs we're doing around the state, as are SRP, APS, Center for the Future of Arizona, and the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community. All important partners, whatever topic we address, who really believe in the process that we're engaged in listening to all of you and finding what ideas you have to move our state forward. So we can go ahead and take that slide down. Thank you, Alex. She knew I was going to say that. Because this is really a fairly brief program for this topic, I will say now that I'm giving a very brief introduction of a complex, difficult, and interesting topic of voting in elections. So I would highly recommend, if you have not already accessed it, to look at the background report that was edited by the Morrison Institute, who did a wonderful job giving a factual overview of our current voting and elections process. And if you want a shorter dive into it, we have a 2-page key facts document on our website and circulated to all of you that also gives kind of a quick overview of what are Arizona's shared public values and where some of the key opportunities are in trying to ensure that our voting and election system is really giving the best for all of Arizona. There is one particular systems issue that I'd like to highlight because it is not only mentioned in our background report, it is also part of a report that we put together in partnership with Vitalyst called Why Primaries Matter and What to Do About It. We are doing a lot of our programs on this topic ahead of the primary, which is at the end of July. Different for us and really important this year, because one thing I think everyone would conclude when they look at the facts in the background report and that separate publication of Why Primaries Matter is that primaries are an important area for us to address if we want our laws and what happens in Arizona to better reflect what most Arizonans want. So I'm just going to highlight a few facts from that report, but I encourage you to dive into it a little yourself. And looking at the participants of today's program, I have a feeling a lot of you already know some of this information and may bring it up as part of the discussions. And the discussions are the most important part of these programs. So if you are not an independent, you're in the minority of Arizona voters. Independents now outnumber Republicans and Democrats as registered voters in Maricopa County and in the state as a whole. Why does that matter with the primaries? Independents do not participate nearly as much in the primaries, in part because many don't know that they can, and there is a lot of confusion around that. They also aren't reached out to in the same way that those who are registered in a party are reached out to so that they know what their rights are. What's the impact of this? The impact is that 10 to 20% of Arizonans are basically deciding who gets into office in most of our state offices. And the incentives, whether you're running for office or holding office, are to address just the concerns of that small percentage, usually in your party primary. And yet most people aren't voting in the primaries. This is what has been shown to be really one of the main systems issues that keeps Arizona as a whole from passing the laws or regulations or having the leadership that reflects what most Arizonans want. I'm putting that in air quotes. If you look at the Gallup polls that the Center for the Future of Arizona has completed, or arguably our Arizona town halls and community town halls, which are almost like focus groups around the state. So that's one area that you might want to consider as you think about systems changes and what we need to do. The other concept I'll highlight, and then I'm going to turn it over to our facilitators for our discussion today, is that Arizona has been a leader across the nation in voting and elections in many ways, including the ability to quickly register or to change your party if you choose, early voting, which is incredibly, and mail-in voting, which is incredibly popular in Arizona, and Arizona has been a leader in that. And so it's just important to recognize that Arizona has been a leader in a lot of voting and election reforms that give more voice to those who are registered voters. And I bring that up in part because we just did a program in Pinal County last night, and that was brought up that we should not just look at where the problems are. We should note that Arizona has been and can be a leader in positive reform. With that, I'm now going to turn it over to our process where we hear from you. And we have two wonderful folks who are going to be facilitating that process. I mentioned that Vitalyst is and has been an important partner of ours in community engagement and systems change. Sergio Perez, the Director of Strategic Communications, is going to serve as your facilitator, facilitating the discussion today. And we're very lucky to have a recorder, Caroline Michaels, who is the founder and owner of A440, who's going to serve as your recorder. Your agenda may have initially listed me as a recorder, but I saw that Caroline had registered and was thrilled that I could sit and listen and have someone with her talents be our recorder today. So here's how it will work, and then I'll turn it over to Sergio. We'll throw a question out for the entire group, and Alex from Arizona Town Hall will also put that in the chat room so you have easy reference. And then Sergio will call on you to respond to the question. You can raise your virtual hand, or you can turn your video on and raise your real hand. I will tell you that if possible, it is much easier for Sergio and also for Caroline if your video is turned on, because part of what we do is we look at the reactions of everyone to statements that are made. So if someone says a statement that you agree with, nod in your head, or you can do a thumbs up, whether your real thumb or your virtual thumb. It's really helpful for us and important in trying to determine, is this a consensus statement? Because it is the consensus and where we see agreement throughout the entire group that we want to put down into our report. So that's kind of how the process goes. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sergio to lead the discussion from here.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you everybody for joining us on this Tuesday morning. I'm going to give you a brief overview of Vitalyst, just since we have you all here. If you're not aware of Vitalyst, Vitalyst Health Foundation is a health conversion foundation. So about 28 years ago or so, the St. Luke's Hospital system was sold off, and the proceeds of that sale funded our foundation. And since then, we've been working to improve the health of Arizona's communities. And then, gosh, Suzanne took over about 10 years ago, and we said it's time to change things up and not just give grants to organizations to work on programmatic work and really change the system. So our big thing is systems change. So we have our grants programs that work on systems change from different tiers, from technical assistance to all the way our larger systems change grants programs. And then we have programmatic work. So we have 3 programmatic priorities that we focus on, which are civic health, which is why you're all here today. So that's really changing the rules of the game so that everyone has a fair shot in being involved in the civic engagement process. Housing is a critical issue in Arizona, so that's another one of our priorities. And then the last one is healthcare integration. So that's ensuring that when you go to your physician, they're not just talking to you about your medical health, but everything else that we deem as part of the Elements of Health community, which is our way of referring to social determinants of health and ensuring that if you go to the doctor, they ask you if you're hungry, if you're dealing with any abuse issues or issues that you might be, dealing with at home, or if you're not housed currently, how you might be able to tackle those and help you refer to organizations that might be able to help you. So that's what we do. If you're ever interested in talking to us, we have an open door policy, and all of our emails and phone numbers are listed on our website. So thank you for letting me give you that little quick overview. And let's begin with our process. So as Tara said, there's 25 of us here right now. So rather than the usual process where we break out into smaller groups, we're going to do this all together. So when I pose the question, and if you raise your hand, I will try to call you in the order in which I saw your hand go up. And then one of the key tenets of Arizona Town Hall is that if you have something with which you disagree, we want you to disagree in a civil manner. So we want engaged discussion, but we want you to do it in a civil way and respect everybody else's viewpoints so that we can come to that consensus. So without further ado, and if we get to a point where we have some stalling to do, we'll to give Caroline time to come up with that consensus statement. We might have to, give you some little prompts to get the discussion going, but we will do that as it arises. So the first question for all of us to consider is, what constitutes an effective democracy? How is it important to us individually, to our community, our state, and our nation? So I think Alex might have put it in the chat already. So let me look around the room. Who wants to get us started with their thoughts on this?
We have some virtual hands up.
There we
Sergio.
go. Linda, we'll go with your hand first.
I think Elaine put her hand up first.
Elaine, gosh, I'm blind. Elaine, please share with us your thoughts.
I didn't put my hand up yet. But I will say that what I think constitutes an effective democracy is adequate and appropriate representation. So one of the problems that I see right now with our democracy is that it does not effectively represent the majority of people.
Meredith, what about you? What are your thoughts?
To dovetail on what was just said, I think that a important factor of that is that people don't know themselves. And if it's appropriate, I would like to post a Pew Research poll or quiz that can help people find what their political typology is. Because I think what happens sometimes is that people just vote by branding instead of what they actually believe. And part of the reason that they don't know what they actually believe is that they don't know what all is on the menu, if you will. So I think just voter education is also, in a way, self-reflection. And so I think that we need to encourage voters to do that self-reflection. And it's already been done. It's just, it's not marketed in such a way that people actually do it. So I'll post that in a moment.
Yeah. Linda?
Thank you, Sergio. I think that an effective democracy is one that is by the people and for the people. Everybody wants to know that their voice matters. And for an effective democracy, you want to know that you make a difference and that your opinion and your vote matters.
Thank you. Else? Hands. Kathy, is that your hand up? That is.
That is. I would say one of the big problems is that we don't have as many choices especially in the general election. And that is, a lot of that is because we are so dominated by the two-party system that has evolved to the point where they manipulate the system actually so that it makes any kind of competition almost impossible to have. So lack of competition.
Thank you. Lori?
Good morning, everyone. I think what came to my mind when I read the question first was safety, something that we, not too long ago, I think maybe most of us took for granted in America, but now I think it's important for voters and citizens to feel safe, speaking up, expressing their views, voting, and volunteering on election day, whether it's at polls or canvassing. And I think we've lost a sense of safety, and I think that's essential in an effective democracy.
Just as an aside, if you're ever interested, and if you live in Maricopa County or whichever county you live in, hopefully they have an open process in which you can go tour the elections office here in Maricopa County. They have tours a couple times a month, so you can go check out what Recorder Richter is doing. And it is insightful into the process. Is there any other hand up? April?
No, I believe there was someone before me.
Was there? Gosh.
No, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name.
It's McKaylin.
McKaylin, thank you.
Good morning, my name is Michaelin. I agree with, I think it was Meredith made a point about voter education. I think it's really difficult to have a representative democracy if the people don't know what they want. And there is a lot of data showing that the people don't know what they want because they aren't educated in the issues or the potential solutions. And so that also leads to them electing officials who I think are a lot more polarized than they are personally, because you can't really have a super strong opinion about something if you don't know about it. So we see a lot more highly emotional politics from political elites than we do from everyday people, which I think really creates a disconnect between the people and who they see supposedly represent.
Thank you for that. April?
Yes, thank you. Civility, I think, is key to an effective democracy, to be able to have conversations and, similar to what we're doing here, have them in a manner where people are heard, feel like they're heard, and come to some form of, yes, that is what's best for the people. That is what our people are telling us they want. But I don't think we can have an effective democracy if we're just yelling over each other. So civility is key for me.
Thank you for that. KJ?
Good morning, everyone. So I would definitely agree that I think one of the most important parts of an effective democracy is every voter feeling heard. And as a community college student, the thing that I hear over and over again from my peers is that they feel that their vote doesn't matter. They feel that when they go to the polls and they do cast that vote, that it's not doing anything and that our government is ineffective in enacting the kinds of policies and the kinds of change that they want to see. And so I think a big part of why we see such a low voter turnout and such a big problem with our democracy today is that so many people are disillusioned by the system and don't feel that their vote or that their voice matters or counts at all.
Thank you for that. Is there anyone else? Kathy, would like to piggyback?
I'd say another thing that an effective democracy needs is it needs to be accessible. It needs to have, needs to not have barriers so that everybody can participate freely.
Thank you. April?
I just had a question for KJ. Does it have anything to do with the Electoral College, or is it just, I just don't feel like my voice matters?
I would say that it definitely, there is definitely an aspect of that, the Electoral College, and kind of feeling that the system itself is convoluted in some ways, because I've definitely talked to other students that feel that the way that we run elections is very convoluted. But the other part, I think, is just that when officials are elected, sometimes it can take a very long time to see actual change in the system. It can take a very long time for policies to make their way just kind of like, you know, through our governmental systems. And I think that that's part of why. And another part is just kind of like, yeah, I'm one person. What can I do? You know, and I think there's that kind of mentality as well. So I think there are a lot of factors that contribute to it, but those are some of the main ones.
Thank you for that. Madison?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I really resonated with what Kathy shared about access and the ability for folks to show up and participate is a really key factor in my mind of what constitutes an effective democracy. We really have to have robust participation from all people in order to, you know, to build what I would say is an effective democracy. And I think that that boils down to how we're able to access the different entry points of democracy. And so would build a little bit on that and share that I think that we need to address the systemic barriers that have been put into place as we've built out our democratic system in the US in order to have folks really show up and be able to authentically participate in the democracy that we want and a democracy that really works for everyone.
Thank you for that. Coral, we'll have you go next, and then Casey.
I apologize for being off camera, but I'm driving. I think that there's a lack of understanding as to what a democracy is and what it is not, and what it means to participate in a democracy. I think that you have people that think things should happen instantaneously, and that is not the case in a democracy. I also think that people have an assumption that they're right and other people are wrong, and that the way people feel isn't necessarily valid. For example, we talk about what we as Arizonans want and the majority of what we want. I think we need to acknowledge, though, that there are Arizonans that want something else, because I think that's clearly reflected in what is happening in politics here in Arizona, not only in Arizona, but nationally, right? So we can live in a democracy and the majority of us could want one thing or want to go one direction. But there is a certain percentage of people who are not interested in going that direction. I think we need to acknowledge that.
Thank you for that. Casey, and then Meredith. Maybe you raised your hand by accident. Meredith?
Casey, can you unmute, please?
Oops, I'm a dummy. Sorry. Just trying to be a good listener. No, I just wanted to comment on the earlier multiple entry point thing. I think a lot of people don't really know that they can participate in their respective governing structures, like for example, city council meetings and other entry points, that it's not just about the elections. Like, oh, now that every 2 years I vote and now I just twiddle my thumbs and wait for the next time to come around, you know, that sort of thing. So it would be nice if we built out more awareness about the existing entry points that people have. Like you still can in fact go down to the legislature or do the request to speak system. More awareness needs to be built around that process. And if we can make it more accessible, period, I think that would make for a more effective democracy. Because I think when the average person thinks of democracy, they think of comments on a message board somewhere and how toxic and mean that can really be. But in moderated discussions and forums, such as this one, if people had a chance to participate in more of those, we'd be in a better place than we are today.
Thank you. Meredith?
Several thoughts, and I'm probably going to forget some, so thank you for your patience with me. Keying off of something that was said earlier about not feeling heard, it's almost like the analogy that I like is that we're voting for our wait staff, and the wait staff are the cooks in the kitchen. And the cooks in the kitchen might be vegans, they might be vegetarians, they might be carnivores, or they might be cannibals, right? And so in their trying to sous chef something together that air quotes everybody would like, I mean, you know, no, I will never be a cannibal. I don't want that. But there's some people that that is what they want. And so that keys off of a second thing that someone else said, that some people, you know, a majority want this, but a smaller portion want that. Um, I think there's nuance there that we need to consider. And maybe the folks that, you know, I don't understand it, but they do want cannibalism. Okay. Um, we need to figure out a way so that the cannibals can be over there and the vegans can be over there, and you know, whatever. So that we don't like step on each other and inadvertently, you know, get situations that people don't want. So that's the other thing. And then the final thing, and I can't believe that I remembered all of the things, hooray, is to the point of multiple entry points. It's time consuming for some people to even vote at all, never mind the additional participation options that are available. And some people, you know, have multiple jobs. For example, I'm thinking of one individual, he has 3 jobs, and it's enough, like he has enough to do without having to weed through the opinions and the noise and all of these things to, one, have the self-awareness to know what he believes, to find candidates that are in alignment with that, and then to go to forums like this or go to the Capitol or like there's a socioeconomic strata associated with participation, and that isn't fair. And so somehow we need to design the process so that it can include more socioeconomic levels. And I think I've spoken enough, so I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Madison, I think you might have had your hand up. If you have anything to wrap us up, if not, we will give Caroline some time. But
I was just showing my support for a comment that was made with the clapping emoji. But would agree with what Meredith just shared about really needing to redesign the system. And a part of that is looking at how the system was built originally and understanding that it was designed to shut people out of the process. And so we really need to think about it from a holistic, I'm so glad Vitalyst Foundation is the one sponsoring this, but really from a holistic systems level perspective in order to make sure that it is equitable and people can really participate in a way that works for them.
thank you. Kathy, if you want to wrap us up.
I will, just because I was so inspired by what Meredith and Coral was saying. A working democracy does ensure that the minority voice is heard, but it also it recognizes that compromise is a legitimate thing.
Thank you for that. All right, now let's give Caroline some time. That question, Tara, what do you guys have going on? Are you guys going anywhere fun?
Oh, we have so many things going on. You know, it's interesting. People outside of our organization think we have about 50 or 60 paid employees. Instead, we have wonderful volunteers like Caroline or Sergio, who's facilitating this, and some of you who are participants at this program. But one of the things I thought I'd bring up about this particular program is how we select topics. They're selected once a year at our annual meeting. And they're selected by first taking a survey early in the year to see what is it that people want to talk about and think we need to address. 2 years ago, the topics for consideration were water, climate change, education, and this topic. And for the first time in all the many years I've been to the annual meeting, the other speakers basically said, my topic's really important, but if you want to solve it, you need to pick voting and elections. because we're not solving our biggest problems because there are systems issues we need to be looking at. So I think that's important to consider for all of us as community leaders and the participation in this particular group. By the way, what an engaged and informed group already, the way you all jumped in. You know, I've done a couple of these programs on this topic already. This is the most, the quickest and deepest dive of any participant so far. It's really quite impressive. And what we will be doing, and some of you are partnering with us on this, is we will continue to do this kind of program throughout the state. This one is virtual. Just last night, I was in Pinal County doing an in-person one. I see we have Mayor Cal Sheehy is attending this program. He's going to be partnering and doing some programs up in Mojave County with us coming up. There are others also involved with different programs. If there is not a program in your community and you want one, just contact us. We can put them together pretty quickly. We also, actually, maybe on this topic, David, if you don't mind me throwing it over to you really quickly, because there was another report that David helped put together that I think is important in realizing that the topic of voting in elections is not just about our leaders, but it's connected intimately and importantly to our health.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tara. As Sergio mentioned, Vitalyst has some key priorities that we work on, and I have the great pleasure of overseeing our portfolio that we call Civic Health, which is essentially how people are coming together every day to tackle their toughest challenges, and in our case, improve the health of their communities, very much like you all are doing right now by letting your voice be heard through this community town hall process. As Sergio also mentioned, we take an upstream approach in our work focused on policy, systems, and environmental changes. So our civic health work is really all about making it easier and fair for all Arizonans to be able to engage in their community in a wide variety of ways, including voting as this topic presents itself, but also by volunteering, giving to your favorite local charity, letting your voice be heard in a community town hall like this, or as one of the participants mentioned in the dialogue, at your local city or town council meetings, school board meetings, and whatnot. So there's a whole variety of ways that residents of our great country can engage in their community and flex their civic muscle. And there's a growing body of evidence, of research, and a growing movement that is showing that there is a intersection between being civically engaged and participating civically and positive health outcomes and positive health policy outcomes. So if you're wondering why is Vitalyst Health Foundation as a health foundation focused on voting in elections and this concept of civic health, is exactly because of that. That if you are engaged in your community, letting your voice be heard by voting, both in the primary elections and the general elections, you are contributing to a healthier life and to a healthier community, healthier state, and ultimately a healthier country and democracy. So as Tara alluded, we've been working to showcase this research and movement through a series of reports that we call Spark reports that showcase that. We have those published at vitalysthealth.org. We're also really proud to partner with Arizona Town Hall on that Spark report that Tara mentioned, highlighting the importance of primary elections and all Arizonans' ability to participate in that elections, no matter if you're a Republican, Democrat, or especially an independent. So if you are an independent voter in Arizona, you should be receiving a postcard coming up relatively soon because the primary election this year is a little bit earlier, July 30th. And if you're an independent voter, you have every right to choose the ballot of your choice. So make sure to do that. And if you choose to vote on election day, you can go to the polling site and request the specific partisan ballot that you prefer to vote in on election day. So definitely stay tuned for all of the fantastic events and other community town halls that the great team at Town Hall, the small but mighty team at Town Hall led by the great Tara Jackson. So we're glad to partner in this way.
He was paid to say that. No, thank you, David. And so those reports Suzanne put are located on the Vitalyst Health website. We also have them on the page under this topic, including that why primaries matter. And I want to point out, for one of our student participants here today mentioned, you know, how you feel like your vote doesn't count, or you feel like engaging doesn't count. There is a part in our Why Primaries Matter report, a pullout called Tips for Making Your Vote Count. Some easy tips on how to make your vote count. And I'll tell you that that was inspired some years ago by a presentation I was doing with a lot of community college students, where they said, well, how do we make our vote count? We feel like it doesn't matter. And those were the tips that we gave to them, including, how do you vote for all those judges? There's a tip for how to do that, right? Very helpful. And I also want to mention, and Linda, I'm giving you a slight heads up here, that I'm going to be calling on you in a second. I mentioned when I did the introduction that Arizona Town Hall is involved now far beyond Arizona. We have for some years really been working in partnership with our neighbors to the south in Sonora, Mexico, and expanding that as part of this understanding that came out of a statewide town hall some years ago of the importance of developing and fostering the relationships and understanding, not only with Mexico, but now with groups around the world. And Linda is one of those amazing unpaid employees, if you will, volunteers, who chairs our International Relations Committee. And Linda, would you like to highlight some of the things we're doing there?
Certainly, Tara. Thank you so much. With the International Relations Committee, what we find is the whole town hall process is appreciated by people from other nationalities as well as our own, where people get to sit around a table or be virtually like we are today and talk about different topics that affect them. And we find that in different countries, there isn't necessarily this particular process that's available, and they latch on and really appreciate it. Since 2017, we have been doing Arizona, Mexico town halls, primarily in Hermosillo, Sonora. I think Hector was with us. He was very involved with us with that as well. And just this year, we decided to do an event that focused on the topic of strengthening regional economies through empowering women entrepreneurs, which we did in Tempe. That was very exciting. The women there, and we had some men as well, were very involved in networking, and we found that there were so many commonalities with that as well, where they were concerned about childcare. They were concerned about overcoming the obstacles that they found. During the pandemic, we also found that instead of stopping everything, we started doing virtual Arizona, Mexico town halls that could do a deeper dive on specific topics. And we've done everything from agriculture to hockey, fans of hockey, and how there's an internationalization of hockey fans that is being pursued by the different sports, not just hockey. So we would welcome your participation when we do these. We have a couple of virtual topics that are coming up this year on language and employability that will be done on Zoom, and also on micro-credentials that will also be done on Zoom. Thank you, Tara.
Thanks, Linda. And we also, with some of international groups, but not just international groups, we do training on the town hall process, so that, because this process is really where that kind of community interaction takes place, where you can have a respectful conversation and solving difficult problems. And that is an Arizona export that has now been exported through trainings to, I don't even know how many countries now. I'm guessing well over 20 countries, with training programs we've done by groups of people coming here to study what we do. And on the voting and elections topic, we do programs like this, the interactive conversations. We also are doing just regular presentations on the topic. It could be 15 minutes. I bring that up as an example because tomorrow evening, I'll be doing a 15-minute presentation to a group just on this topic, so that we can continue to educate and spread information, including some of the reports that we have out there. So I know we're getting close to that second question time, Caroline. Oh, there she is. Perfect timing for your read back. So I'm going to mute myself now and turn it back over to Sergio and Caroline.
Caroline took everything we said and condensed it into a grand idea. So we will let her read that back to us now. If there's anything that we might have missed, please wait until she's finished and then we'll add to it.
Thank you, Sergio. Democracy requires definition. Looking at what it is not is by understanding that it is not instantaneous, it is not about feelings, and it is about a broad spectrum of wants and needs. The key cornerstones of democracy and its importance include appropriate representations. Voters may align to brand versus beliefs. So voters need to self-reflect to avoid electing politicians who are polarizing. Representation reflects a lack of choice that's driven by a manipulated two-party system that dampens competition. Another cornerstone is voter education. Voting is a complex and time-consuming system that does not have instantaneous results. Socioeconomic strata associated with elections are inherently unfair. Creating a sense that votes matter drives voter turnout. Safety is another cornerstone, and it is an emerging issue that may injure democracy. Civility, another cornerstone of our democracy, is essential to being effective. Lastly, accessible voting is the final cornerstone, and the ability for people to show up and participate and remove systematic barriers is essential. With multiple entry points, participation in civic education is not just about elections, and more awareness is needed about how participation can be done and how to access it. To summarize, we vote for a select few that serve a diverse population with different tastes, values, and beliefs.
Is there anything on there that we missed or you might want to tweak? Meredith?
Somehow tie that socioeconomic strata is tied to the amount of time that someone has available to dedicate to voting and all of the adjacent activities. I don't know how to phrase that. You did brilliant, Caroline, but somehow work that in.
Socioeconomic strata is associated with elections that is inherently unfair.
Something about the time commitment, though. It's not just a fairness issue. It's a
You're talking
yes,
like
it's
if I
unfair.
have two jobs, I
And
can't
does not reflect the time.
Yes.
Does not reflect the investment of time that voters need in order to participate effectively.
Yeah, I think that sounded great.
And I should add, first of all, thanks for that comment. Great statement, Caroline, that what we do after the fact is, and we can clean that up, is we don't change the content or intent, but we'll clean up the grammar as needed and make sure that it makes sense. So we can work that in. Thanks.
All right, you guys ready for number two? Question number two is, to what extent do our current political and civic systems support an effective democracy? What, if any, changes should we consider to our election processes, civic structures, or democratic institutions to support an effective democracy? Consider how any proposed changes would impact processes, structures, institutions, and individuals. And that was a lot to read, so if you want to read it in the chat. Ken. Ken, kick us off.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to add one thing to some of the things that Kathy Connected and others have talked about, is the fact that I think that there's if you want to call it a crisis, I do, of confidence in the whole election process. And I think we need to focus on all the things that we have talked about this morning, but that also includes how do we restore that confidence in elections, because the whole process is under attack, and that discourages people from voting also.
For that. Anybody else? Who we got? Kathy.
I will be a cheerleader for mail-in ballots. I love that. I think that really makes the process easier for a lot of people and really speaks to what Meredith was saying too.
Can't be a lengthy process. I think this year's ballot's going to be 4 pages. Lots to digest. Anybody else? Let's think about processes. How do we, or the structures, how do we make it more?
I'll add in what is likely to be a ballot initiative is the open primaries, which would, it's not ranked choice voting, but it is open primaries. And it's being opposed by both the traditional Democratic Party and the Republican Party, because it would reduce their influence. And Kathy talked about that, saying that it's become so dominant that it's almost more important for them to save the parties than it is to allow and encourage voting, which leaves out, as we've talked about, a lot of the independents. So it will be important for all of you and for our other voting colleagues to look at that initiative carefully and to see if that might be something that could address the fact that we have sometimes under 20% voter turnout in the primaries.
Thank you for that. KJ?
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of piggyback off of some of what's already been said, in that I think that the way that the system is currently structured, with the two-party system and things like that, that there is a high incentive for politicians to be very, very polarizing and to take very extremist stances. I think there's a lot less incentive to try to reach across the aisle and make compromise, because you can simply get more votes if you take these very, very extremist positions. And I think that represents the kind of lack of choice that we kind of have in the system to a certain degree, because a lot of these very like the choice for a voter, even though they may not agree with all of these extremist positions, they may be pigeonholed into voting for this candidate because this candidate is the only viable one. So I think that that's a large issue within our current system that may lead to some of the feelings of not being represented that we see in a lot of people.
Thank you for that. Casey?
Going to unmute myself this time correctly. So to touch on what KJ said, I've read about fusion voting as a means to reduce the polarizing choices that we've gotten to the which is where we've gotten to this point, as a means to correct that. But I do want to answer both questions that we are doing. Is that I do think mail-in voting is something we've done very well in this state, and that is something I want to conserve and protect. I feel that is like my inheritance when I became of age, turned 18, and mail-in voting was very accessible, and I want to defend that. That will be probably the hill I'll die on, probably forever. But to the second part of like what reforms and what changes, I do think fusion voting, and I'm probably going to explain this poorly, but ever since I read about it in, I want to say it was the New Republic, but essentially you can have smaller parties in still endorse and still endorse other candidates, and candidates will want their endorsement and seeking their endorsement so that they can have multiple entries on the ballot line, such that they have to appeal to more constituencies, and they'll therefore have to be less polarizing overall. I think that's an essential reform. And the other thing I think is, as a broad scale thing, is automatic voter registration. I think it's silly that we have people jump through the hoop of registering when you're a citizen of you're a citizen of wherever you are in the country. You should just be automatically registered. It's a silly hoop to jump through. And when you want to participate, you should be able to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Kind of going along with some of what the other folks have said, I think anything that makes it harder for people to get to the polls or to get their ballot to the polls. There's a lot of discussion about people giving their ballot to someone else to mail in, and that we want to restrict that. When you think about people living in a care facility or somebody who is disabled, or even people who work hours that are not compatible with the time that polling places are open, it seems to me any kind of change that makes it harder for people to get their voice heard in a reasonable manner needs to be opposed. It just gets you to the point where so many of these changes that you hear people talking about strike me as, let's find a way to eliminate the votes of these people who might oppose my particular candidate or my particular position. That if we narrow the electorate to the people who feel most vehemently about something that we know are going to go to the polls no matter what, that somehow that favors a particular candidate, and therefore feeds this thing about my voice is not heard.
Thank you for that, April, and then Jacob.
Kathy, I definitely agree with you. I just also want to make sure that we don't have the potential for voter fraud. So there has to be some kind of mechanism in place that somebody can't just take somebody else's, mail-in ballot and do what they want with it. But I totally agree that there's too many restrictions. So, but with the caveat that we ensure that voter fraud is, that we're ensuring safety against voter fraud, I guess is what I'm
and April, I share that. There has to be a balance between not being able to do anything and opening up the door for voter fraud. And
absolutely,
we seem to go the opposite directions.
Yes, I agree 100%. The point I wanted to make was it seems like you have to have a certain level of money to be able to even run for an office. And so I would never be able to consider, I wouldn't consider it anyway, but I would never be able to consider it because I couldn't afford it. Especially at a national level. And so how can we encourage people who have the right mindset, the smarts, the ability to understand people's needs and to collaborate with others who don't have the level of funding that it takes to get there. And so I think, to me, that's part of our system is I don't really feel like I'm represented because you don't know, have you ever lived my socioeconomic life? Do you really understand what it's like to struggle day to day, what it's like to have to work 3 jobs just to be able to afford your rent? If you don't have that lived experience, it's more difficult to speak on behalf of people who do.
Thank you for that. Jacob?
Yeah, I'm not sure my opinion is maybe as nuanced, but I would say ever since 2013, most of our we've passed a lot more voter suppression laws. And I think until we kind of return to having a federal protection over the right to vote with the new Voting Rights Act or even a state Voting Rights Act, I think we're going to keep seeing these sort of voter suppression laws in the future.
Thank you. All right, let's see. Lori and then Kellen and then Kathy, if we can, do it succinctly and then we'll move on.
Totally agree with what Jacob said about passing the Voting Rights Act, but also want to say a word about the influence of money in politics and efforts to curb the influence wherever we can do. Our organization and I personally supported the Voters' Right to Know Act that passed 2 years ago. Would like to continually see that continue to be protected and upheld.
Thank you. Colin? You went on mute.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what April had said, that it takes money to run, yes, but at least as far as state offices go, it also takes money to serve. Our state senators and representatives only make $24,000 a year. And so if we're talking about people from lower socioeconomic statuses or, younger people that don't have a business that they can run passively or retirement income that they can pull from, it really detracts or it limits the pool of people who can afford to run and still survive.
Great. Kathy?
Yay on the money comments. They're all exactly right. I just wanted to do one pitch for ranked choice voting or anything that allows for more than 2 candidates in the general, because when you only have 2 candidates, those candidates are absolutely incentivized to find nothing in common with one another and destroy the competition. And it ruins any hope of any civility in campaigning. So ranked choice all the way, but anything that'll give us more than 2 choices in the end.
Thank you. Meredith and then Cal. Meredith, I think you had your hand up.
And I was muted. Maybe unpopular because it imports from, elsewhere, but could we have something akin to a parliamentary system at some point in our lives before I'm dead? And then that way people, are not incentivized to be against each other, but incentivized to collaborate with each other. And like, there's like I don't know what the word is. Is it, tickets is the only word that I'm coming to mind, but what is that word? Coalition, someone wrote. Yeah. Where we have a coalition system, and then also they have to, they have their metrics with which they have to meet. Like, okay, you have to get along with these people that you don't necessarily get along, but you have to pass X amount of things. Otherwise, you aren't doing your job that we elected you for. Like, you have a job. And so as a representative of the people, you can't just get campaign money and have a X amount of year job if you aren't actually doing it. So let's have performance metrics, and you have to do something in your tenure when you're in office. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Cal?
Hi, good morning. I just want to advocate a little bit for the local offices. So a lot of the conversation that I'm hearing is more of the state and national, but I believe it all happens at the local level. I think some of the things that we can do is education. We don't we lump government or democracy all into one bowl, but there's distinct things through the Constitution or state statutes or city codes that each level of government has. And if we were to educate the electorate on what those are, I think that we would have more engagement. And with that education, people could have access through the processes that already exist. And once we're educated, we can then change the process. I mean, that's the great thing about our republic, is that we can change those things. But if we don't know what it is we're trying to change, that's very difficult. Arizona has been a leader in access as far as early voting options, mail-in options, a day of voting. There's lots of things that are there that leaders, before all of us have implemented. That doesn't mean it's perfect, but I think that we can work on some of that. Also, as part of the education, I am an elected person. And sometimes people look at electeds as an entity or a thing. And so as soon as we become elected, we're no longer people. And it's just assumed that we don't represent the people, or that we don't struggle, or that we don't have to work multiple jobs to do things without even ever asking the question. There are so many things that I see from people that they just make assumptions about who I am without ever even asking. And it's disheartening, because I think that prevents good people from running. And I've heard a few people this morning say, I would never even consider it. But it really is a feat, and you are putting yourself up against a really large force of uncertainty and also just misinformation.
Thank you for that. KJ, I think we're going to have you kick us off on the next question, so we can move on and give Caroline some time to bring us together in the consensus statement. Tara?
Thanks so much, Sergio. So, wow, what great discussion. Here's what we're going to do. Many of you have already started to answer the next question. So, Alex, if you'll throw that up in the chat room, and really this discussion will end up answering questions 2 and 3 as we move through the rest of this morning. And you'll see that it's what action should be taken and by whom to make electing in our democracy more effective. There have already been quite a few ideas, some of them with systems change, whether it's about the party system, some of them thanks to Cal or Mayor Sheehy in Lake Havasu City, who also brought up the personal actions that each of us can take, maybe if it's even how we address or deal with our elected leaders. So with that, I'll take my hand down, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting who it was that had their hand up to start this one.
AJ.
Still here? Yes, okay.
Right, thank you, appreciate it. No, I was just gonna piggyback kind of off of a little bit of what Cal was saying about education really being at the core of all of this. And I think that at a governmental level, we definitely need to, I think, integrate voter education and like proper voting practices and things like that into the classroom. I think that, I got some education growing up on what our government looks like, but not necessarily on how to be a good voter and how to engage with voting, how to go about voting. And I think that really education and learning about what is important at every single level of the process, from a local level to a state level to a just obviously national level, is very important, and for everyone to know their options in terms of voting and in terms of just the system in general.
Thank you. Meredith?
To post the link to the chat again, just for, for reference. But I really would love, and to key off of the earlier point that was just shared, maybe not who to vote for, but, to thyself be true. And so that means know yourself. And that means being able, my civics class, it was essentially a glorified history class where I learned things all the way back from the 1800s, but not about how to engage in voting today. And I think it really is, there's some self-reflection that a person has to do. And so and so we need to somehow make it so that incorporated into the classroom that we have this, these are the options, figure out where you are. You don't have to tell anybody what they are, what your thing is, because that's private. I mean, you can be as loud about it as you want, I suppose. But to know yourself and then to act according to whatever is in alignment to what you are. And then, and this is the important piece, having the candidates do the same. And so then that way people can actually not get caught up with the advertising and the manipulation that goes into political ads and whatnot, but they can be like, okay, these are the issues, and this candidate aligns with me on this issue, and so I'm going to vote for them, and make it just more straightforward and apparent of where someone stands, and then after they're elected, hold them accountable.
Thank you for that. I will have Coral go, and then Brian, you'll be next.
So I had two things. First of all, I wanted to 100% agree with what Mayor Cal said. I think it's absolutely incredible, just the ugliness that elected officials go through. Once they are elected officials, people don't seem to understand that you might be raising water rates, but you also live in that city. And just the lack of pushback from the other side, for lack of a better way of putting it. I think that that's one of the reasons why a lot of people choose not to run, is just the sheer ugliness of it. The second thing I wanted to agree with was, I believe it was the young lady who mentioned the salary when it comes to our state representatives. $24,000 a year, no one can live in Arizona for that. And so what you end up with is you end up with people who have money or have wealth or have a partner that's okay with their hobby. And I think that that's reflected in who we get elected down at the state house as well. That needs to be changed.
Thank you for that. Brian?
Thank you. I just wanted to let the group be aware of a resource that the Maricopa Community Colleges, in partnership with a bunch of other civic organizations, have put together to address this issue of citizenship training and engaging. And we have copies of these. Were paid for by the Vitalyst Foundation. We're very grateful for that. But I'm going to put a link in the chat here with the digital copy. But what these are is they're designed like workforce development modules for groups to be able to have structured conversations about the skills of citizenship and why we should engage and how to put those skills into practice. And they're designed for groups that have a facilitator, and the source takes you, it's the Creating Community project. This source takes you to the facilitator guide and also the participant workbooks. And again, we in Maricopa, we've got some paper copies of these if you have a group you want to share this with. But this is something that I think can help. One reason people are apathetic, at least as I talk to students and people in the community, is because of this feeling that as a country we've forgotten how to talk to each other, and they're unwilling to engage in a conversation because they're afraid that conversation is going to go south in some way. And so it's easier to just disengage and stay apart. And so what these modules are getting at is how to address that underlying concern, because once people are engaged, they vote. And so it's that engagement piece of the puzzle that this resource is there for. So I just want to make you aware of the resource. It's available for anybody to use. So that's a shameless self-promotion advertisement. The resources are free, but we want people to know about it and share it with their groups wherever they are.
And Anna had a comment in the chat. Part of engagement is respectful discourse and critical thinking. I think we have to teach things like classic debate alongside basic civics and American government. So, thank you all for that discussion. See, April?
Yeah, great point, Anna. And actually, everybody's had great points. I think the question is what action should be taken and by whom? And when I think about that, it's us. We're probably we're the only ones that are gonna make those things happen. And that's by voting, talking with our elected officials, talking with our neighbors, talking at work about if we want change, we have to make that happen. And so, yes, education, talking about civility and engagement, all of those things, but what needs to be done by whom is by us.
Thank you. Nicolin?
Thank you. For one of the earlier questions, I think it was Casey mentioned coming down to the legislature and testifying in committee. That is my favorite type of action that the public can take. I think that is so important because members of the public have the ear of their legislators, and also because it allows them to see their legislators at work. You can hear your senators and representatives and what they're saying or not saying about the issues that you care about. So you can determine whether or not you want to vote for them again. It's education through experience. Unfortunately, though, you can only do that usually during committees, which are only held during the first 3 or 4 months of the year, Monday through Thursday during business hours. So obviously that's limiting for a lot of people that, jobs or other responsibilities who don't have the free time to come down. During the pandemic, they made it virtual. And so I think that coming and testifying a lot more accessible because people could take, half an hour out of their lunch break to tune in and then, be heard when they were called upon. But that's not a practice any longer. And so I think that the legislature returning to that modality would really improve the public's ability to share their thoughts, and then also just further encouragement of the public to come down and speak.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Anything? All right. Well, we didn't get a read back on the second question. So, Tara.
Well, it's a perfect segue, actually. So, and Caroline put her video on, so she might be ready, but I'm going to go ahead and chat a little bit first anyway. First, I want to follow up on April's point, which is that it starts with us, and want to set up and encourage you now in the time that we have left to put in the chat room. And we won't add your name to this, but we will use these in the report. An action statement. We call it the I will statement. What one action will you commit to take to move things forward? To that point with April, it starts with us, especially with the group that's in this room. You all are civic leaders in your own community. You have the ability to make change. What one action will that be? And if it's 2 or 3, hey, awesome, but it only needs to be 1. So first of all, to start doing that, it helps inspire other people when we put a list of potential actions at the end of each report that we do for a community town hall. I also wanted to bring up that you will receive an electronic survey as soon as this program is done. We would love for you to fill that out. We very much listen to feedback on surveys. We want to be as much of a service to Arizona and beyond as possible. That's also a place where if you want a program in your community, whether it's a 15-minute presentation or a 2.5-hour discussion or something else, that's one way to communicate with us. I'm glad that Brian brought up that resource. Brian, I think we were connecting at the same time. I was going to have you talk about that. So thanks for doing that. We and many others worked with Brian to put that together, although he took the laboring oar, and it is a wonderful resource for civic and community engagement. It's also an example of the many other ways that whether Town Hall is an organization or some of our partners whom we work with, can be out there helping to solve problems. It does not have to be on the topic du jour, voting and elections. We, throughout the year as an organization, are hired by entities, organizations, governments to come in and use this process for citizen engagement. And thanks for those of you that are starting to put those I will statements in. I do want to take a brief moment to, and I'm going to give it to Brian for this, if you don't mind, to talk about our Future Leaders Town Hall, because I also heard a couple of comments, including from Anna, about how do we bring in the experience and knowledge of how to engage with each other as part of our education. Brian, do you want to talk about your experience with Future Leader Town Halls at all and what that is?
Yes, so we host one at Mesa Community College pretty much every year in the fall. And so the future leaders part of this is that these are students who we're hoping will be future leaders. So we host a town hall at MCC, but there's others around the state as well. And I think what Tara's asking is for you to think seriously about hosting one in whatever group you have access to. But as they go through these questions and they generate these questions, the recorder writes down their answers to those questions, and then we deliver those to the town hall organization, who then assembles that input for the regular town hall. We don't dare call it the grown-up town hall, but if we've got the future leader, I guess present leader, current leader town hall. So that the conversation that the present leaders have is informed by these grassroots, primarily youth, thoughts on these questions. And so it's a way for future leaders and everyday citizens to raise those levels up to the attention of leaders. So I'm a huge fan of the Future Leader Town Hall as a way to have their voice heard, but also to model this notion of consensus-based decision-making and conversations, so that as these students and future leaders experience that, they can realize, oh, this is how we can do it. It doesn't have to be people in $5,000 suits screaming at each other, which is what I thought politics was about. This is just the community getting together to talk about real issues. So that's big, huge fans of that. We'll be doing another one in Mesa this fall on this topic.
Thank you, Brian. And on that note, all of our programs we tailor to the community being served. When it comes to Future Leader Town Halls, which is what they named it themselves some years ago, it used to be called Youth Town Halls, but we quickly realized some students are, I don't know, my age. So it was reframed. But another example of one that we do on a regular basis with the city of Phoenix is they may get a field trip. And last year they had, I think, 7 or 8 high schools, all a field trip to come to one location. And by the way, I love it when it's a community college or a university, because for many of the students, it helps get rid of that intimidation factor of coming to a place of higher education. And by the way, we tell them, please bring all students, especially the ones who are not normally engaged in things like student council. Those are the students who are impacted the most in a brief period of time. It is one of the most inspiring events because we see a transformation with youth who might have felt like, why should I be engaged? Who are very inspired to continue to be engaged. And for our elected leaders in the room, one of the students' favorite parts is that we like to have elected leaders in the room, but they don't get to talk. They go around and listen. And the students just eat that up and love it. So that's another idea, but I think we're at that time where we can get a read back from Caroline and then close out our program.
Thank you. Okay. There is a crisis of confidence in the election process, and restoration of the process is essential to participation. Many areas need reform to promote higher participation, such as fusion voting, automatic voter registration, passage of the Voter Rights Act, and open primaries. The current system encourages polarization and leads to lack of choice. The only viable candidate is not a reflection of what will meet the needs and wants of voters. To encourage better participation, to encourage better representation requires changes to running for and serving in office, which is expensive, poorly compensated, and appeals to a narrow pool of people who do not reflect the lived experiences of the constituency. A two-candidate system leads to polarization. More than two candidates would reflect more of the interests of the community. Having a system that reflects some of the characteristics of a parliamentary system would lead to better collaboration and measures of performance. Finally, local politics is equally important. Voter education is needed to affect change to the process, and elected officials can be stereotyped and fuel misinformation. Finally, in regards to getting voters to the polls, retaining what works, such as mail-in ballots, is essential and is something we do well in Arizona. We need to appeal to all segments versus appealing to a narrow electorate by having fewer restrictions without compromising safety or introducing voter fraud.
Wonderful. And I didn't know, Sergio, I know I'm kind of ending it, whether I bump it back to you, but
No, you're good.
quick, any thoughts, any additional thoughts on that statement? Anything you want to add, change, Cal?
Hi, great statement. Thank you for capturing all of that. One suggestion is on maybe I think it was the second paragraph. It talks about something about the elected leaders don't reflect or because of it's a narrow scope. Maybe just put the word may, because I don't know that it's fair to say that all electeds are not representative, but that certainly those factors that you listed may cause them to be out of touch.
When we listed the different models to explore, like fusion, could we add in there ranked choice is something we should also learn about?
Say it again.
Ranked choice voting is something else we should learn about.
Ranked choice.
Ranked choice voting. Yep.
Yeah, I think you listed the options like fusion voting, just add after that, ranked choice voting.
Got it.
Couple of good edits there. Any other suggestions, changes? Well, wonderful job as someone who often serves in Caroline's role. I really appreciate the skill and the hard work it takes to do that and reflecting the voices of all of you. And Sergio for facilitating this conversation. All of you for giving your time today to be a part of a really important conversation that not only will be shared in this report, but I hope can continue to connect you as you do your own work in your different communities. And hopefully I will be seeing some, if not most of you, in some programs coming up. So thanks again to all of you, and a special big shout out to Vitalyst for helping to bring this program together and bring together as well some really important, valuable publications, the Spark reports that you can find on their website and ours. So I will help create this report and continue to create these programs throughout the state. Thanks again, all of you. Take care.
Thank you.